So I know if you look at it, peering is not, at least from an startup ecosystem perspective, seen as a very hot and interesting topic. It becomes a little too technical, and quite often some of these things go over my head as well. Um, but this is important for us because it's better to understand how these relationships in peering work. And the workshops that we had, the workshop sessions that we had, perhaps have given you an idea of the kind of decisions that get taken, the kind of um, the advantages of peering, the problems that we are seeing, the challenges that we faced, and to some extent the history of how we've got to where we are. And we most of the conversation in the startup ecosystem right now is about AI and AI workloads. About 4 years ago, it was all about uh, Web3 and crypto. But what most folks don't realize is that uh, how these things work and how we're able to use them depend entirely on how one ISP connects to another, or an ISP connects to a data center, and how the internet that we use is delivered to us. Um, and the understanding of interconnection and that path that data takes matters, and fundamentally how it shapes our experience is, to be honest, something that most startup founders who work on the internet don't even think about. They get the internet to them, the internet goes to their customers. How it works is not their consideration. And our hope is that they'll understand the implications of um, how these regulatory changes that are taking place will potentially impact the traffic, right? Because where that traffic is routed from is dependent on the kind of relationships that exist. And we saw a problem of this sort in South Korea a few years ago, where a large content provider was actually servicing the South Korean market from Hong Kong because of the latency, and that created latency because of a network usage fee sort of institution that came into the picture. And so, how that impacts our internet connectivity is something that we have to consider. If IXPs are licensed over here, will some of them cease operations? How will they? How easy will it be for them to function? What kind of regulatory overheads are there? How will that impact the cost of connectivity? Um, that is something that we need to take into account. And um, so whether it's paid peering with the sender party network based mechanism that's being discussed in the EU, the push for the network usage fees, especially from video companies, the licensing of IXPs. These are implications and these are movements that are taking place in the interconnection ecosystem that we need to take into consideration. Um, and even about jurisdiction, about whether uh, internet exchange points should be are whether there is a regulatory mandate that the DOT has to regulate IXP. These are all conversations to be had, right? And we'll discuss all of this um, in a roundtable discussion. Now, the way Media Nama roundtables work is that there's going to be a panel of experts who are dealing with these issues directly, and we'll ask them some questions. But what's most important in this entire conversation is your role in terms of engaging with them. We want your opinion, your views, your understanding to be brought to the table, because that matters to for us to have a proper conversation on this. Is we don't believe in a top down kind of an approach. And so our job will be to engage. We have about 40, 50, 60 questions that we've written out for this conversation. We do our homework. That's what for these conversations. And we hope you have your questions. And we have folks who are running IXPs. We have folks who are dealing with regulators. So I would want you to engage with them. And we have a rule here that there are no stupid questions. If you don't get it, ask. The idea is for you to leave this room with an understanding of what's shaping the space, um, and understanding how peering interconnection works, how those issues impact connectivity, what are the what's the situation that, for example, ISPs and telecom operators are facing that is making them push uh, for example, a regulation of IXPs, right? So I'm going to hand it over to Kamya to run this discussion. I'll jump in every now and then as well. Um, but I'd also like to thank ISOC for hosting this discussion with us, and also our partners in ISOC's Delhi chapter, and the Broadband India Forum for the support. Thank you. And I'll hand it over to Kamya to take it from here. Kamya? There you are. Okay.
Yeah, so let me just quickly invite our panel onto the stage. We have Rahul Vats, Chief Regulatory Officer, Bharti Airtel. We have Ronak Maheshwari, Executive Director, Extreme Labs. Yeah. We have Amrita Chaudhary, Director, CCAOI. Anurag Bhatia, Network Researcher, Hurricane Electric. We have Ajay Kumar, Chief Information Security Officer, TechX. We also have Debashish Bhattacharya, Senior Deputy Director General, Broadband India Forum, but he's running a little late. So we'll start without him and then include him in the conversation later. So Amrita, I'll start with you. So why is peering becoming a regulatory issue in India all of a sudden? In fact, not just in India, around the world, in Europe, in Korea. What has changed in the last decade or so?
If we look at it globally, there are different issues which are going on. One is, if you look at it, internet usage is growing. The cost of laying out new infrastructure is coming in because technology is also, you had 4G, then you had 5G. So there is a technology investment which the telcos are having to make. Simultaneously, the demand for data or usage is growing. So that is, I would say, the traditional income of telcos, which was from telecom calls, etc., is negligibly not there. It has moved to data usage, etc. So I think when the big tech revenues are growing because of the services they give, there is a feeling that the entire data is flowing through an investment made by the telcos. And it's a free ride, which of course is not, because there is a lot of other investments which goes in. So that I would say it is more of a business turf war, I would say, if I can place it this way, which is translating into a discussion of you need to pay me money for this kind of an infrastructure you are using from me. If you look at South Korea, as far as I know, when you're talking about the discussions of network usage fees in one form happening, we see that when this kind of discussion happened, the traffic started moving from Japan, not within the country. It started to come, the CDNs started to move, they started to route it through Japan rather than have it in South Korea. Of course, if you look at some of the OTT players, etc., they did have some tie-ups happening, which they normally have. Businesses normally have their own, even a telco or a tech platform may have their own businesses happening. So that happens. Now, if we look at the Indian context, the compliance burden on telcos is pretty high. So they have a lot of costs which they have to bear. Since the costs are high and they have to lay new infrastructure, etc., they have costs which are coming. Now, and this may be something which, the way I look at it, they want some kind of a shared burden. And that is why they're kind of looking at who can pay. It is the OTTs, as they say, they can pay. Rather, I think the entire narrative needs to be relooked at, is what can be done to ease the way the telcos do business. It could be right of way, it could be the kind of AGRs or the other taxes, etc. they give. Look at reforming that rather than looking at making someone else pay, which doesn't make sense because they also have infrastructures in which they invest. So I think somewhere in India, the narrative has not worked, or we have not looked at the actual issue, and we are trying to look at ways where you can get some money out of something. So I don't know if I've answered you, but that's how I look at it.
You did. And I think it's only fair if, Rahul, you follow that, because I wanted to sort of understand what Airtel's position was on interconnection in terms of IXP licensing and CDN licensing. Why should peering be regulated according to Airtel?
I think let's look at a larger context, and thank you, Amrita, for a very nice summary of where we are today. But let me start by just addressing one small point, and then I'll come back to this. Is that if you look at the overall revenues for a telco over the last few years, and I'm talking about an average telco, not just about Airtel, I think nearly 70 to 80%, depending on which telco you are, your revenues will be coming out purely from your retail services, which will be pure mobility services. Another 20% or so then are maybe coming out from your enterprise sort of services, which peering is, can say be a part of that. Even in the enterprise segment, for example, connectivity will still form large part of that revenue mix. That will be more than 10 to 12%. If you break down, there are other service offerings. There will be cloud, there will be security, and a lot of services which telcos are today offering. So if you look at peering per se alone, that will be a very, very small portion of the overall revenue mix for a telco. Naturally, nobody wants to say that it's not a revenue. It is a revenue. But I'm saying the mix of that in the overall scheme of things for a telco will be very, very minuscule. So it is not a huge revenue thing which is getting driven out here. Let's come back to the discussion on the IXP then. I think the larger part is that, is IXP an efficient way to do things? Absolutely, yes. Is it the right way to connect and share data? Absolutely, yes. There is no doubt that it's an efficient mechanism. And also, I'll be very honest, part of this would have arisen from the way the telcos in the past might have been, and I'm not reflecting on Airtel, I'm talking as an industry, the way the telcos may have been intransigent on how they were dealing with other ISPs and all. And that's the birth of why the IXP would have come in first place. So it's a reflection of perfect regulatory, so as to say, a solution to address how do we address the traffic. So that's fine. I think, let me come to a small point which Amrita alluded to, which is to say that today, if you pick up my license of 42 pages, there will be 16 pages devoted just on security. Right? There'll be large amount of conditions. How do you access data? If it is coming from outside, you have to do a mirror imaging. You should have a proper way of how do you store data, the logs of how you store data. You should have a security policy in place. So there'll be a large part of that portion which is there. Now, is the data which is getting on the IXP critical? Answer is yes, because that data may belong to a lot of things. It may belong to the use cases which you are doing, or the OTTs you are watching. It may belong to, for example, a medical site putting up something out there. So it may be data which can be critical for you. So is the data which is happening on the IXP critical? Yes. Any data in this country is still governed by the Indian Telegraph Act and now the Telecoms Act. So there is a framework to address each data. Then can we have a situation that some part of this ecosystem can say that I am subject to some rules, and the other part can say that, okay, I will not be addressed by any rule at all. That is one question to be addressed. Second part is, since people are now dependent on accessing that data, there'll be a minimum threshold of quality you would expect, a latency you will expect, right? There'll be things about, are you resilient? How will I access it? what will be the methodology? Like, for example, my license will say have a non-discriminatory access for everybody. Will that be assured for anybody else who's trying to access, let's say, a CDN trying to access it, or a CDN to CDN sort of a pairing? Is there a threshold for them to be followed or not? I don't know, right? Should it not be then part of some framework or a guideline to say that it has to be, non-arbitrary, the way you are going to do this? And since you are dealing with data, should there not be a threshold of what the quality of service should look like, at least as a template to say that this is what we should follow, as an internet, is data is governed. So these are the things in my head, which is what should we not have a security benchmark? Should we not have a threshold value of how the data would be treated? Should we not have a benchmark around quality of service the way it will be treated? So those are the questions which need to be addressed. Now, whether it is a licensing, whether it is a guideline, whether it is a framework you want to create, that is a completely separate issue. We are never in favor of license, right? Left to myself, I will say, why should I even have a license? I should also be governed by a authorization or a guideline. And that's the way a lot of people work. If I go to US today, I am subject to authorization under 214. I provide services under 214. I have to self-regulate myself and provide a service. So I'm saying yes, absolutely for it. But I'm saying if you are handling data and that data is similar for me or for anybody else or for ISP or for a CDN, then the thresholds of how you look at it have to be similar. Is the large point we are making. We are not in for any licensing for anybody. Absolutely not.
Understood. There are a lot of questions you've raised, which we have also planned to discuss, but we'll get to those later. I will just do a round of introductory questions first. So, Anurag, based on everything that we heard in the morning, you are effectively an encyclopedia on peering in India. So, how has peering changed in India over the past decade? What changes have enabled peering to develop?
Thanks. So peering has changed significantly in last 10 years. One part is, of course, you had private exchanges which have probably shown up. I don't necessarily recall when Extreme or Decix started, but I think it was within last, say, 10 to 15 years. And that has made quite a heavy dent, along with the presence of large content players. So at this point of time, for most of ISPs, as Ronak initially in his slide said, they can easily get anywhere from 75 to 80% of their traffic over these IXPs if they are inbound heavy. If they are outbound heavy, it's a different picture, because you will find limited number of routes of eyeball players over there. IXPs play quite important role. Another thing which has changed over last 10 to 15 years is the presence of CDN. So at this point of time, if 80% of the traffic is coming from non-transit, a small part of that is peering. A significant part is actually local caches. Thanks to Google, Facebook, Akamai, all of them setting up caches. At this point of time, they have caches pretty much in all major cities and a lot of tier 3 cities as well. I think last I checked, for large telcos, there are caches present in at least 40 plus locations. You can expect them to be typically in all state capitals. You can expect them to be nearby to large cities in the state capitals, as well as anywhere where a significant network scale is being operated. They would have local caches. So that has also changed the interconnection part significantly. So traffic is sitting in these networks. It's not even coming from outside of the networks as of now. And of course, the other important thing which has changed over these years is the NIXI's X minus Y policy that has been removed, which is nice. So it is now an IX similar to all other IXPs globally. No more charges on the traffic, which is nice. I think that's all I think I have to add.
So you mentioned private players coming up, so I think it's fair to ask the private players. Ajay, if you could go first on this. Why do you feel there was a need to launch private IXPs in India? What was the situation when you started?
Hello. So in 2004, when I joined my ex-employer, so there are a lot of discussion happened in the past. Why should big players appear at exchange, and what is the benefit for them? And there are a lot of resistance happening within that organization to allow CDN providers. And I personally visited many European countries, learn about it, and thought that without CDN providers, internet exchange is not going to grow. So I tried my best. Somehow that has not happened. So I decided, let's try to move in the private industry and explore the options.
Mike.
And explore the options. That's why the private first internet exchange in the private industry started. Thank you.
Ronak, if you want to like continue this.
I have a different perspective on why private exchanges, especially extremes, started in what we are doing, why we are doing, and why I am doing it. So back in 2004, 2005, when I
Could you hold your mic up?
yeah, sorry. So back in 2004, 2005, when I passed out of the university, Pune University, in 2002, the college which I was doing engineering in got the first internet line, and it was 64 kbps ISDN. And I was like, wow, internet is a whole new world, right? And I then landed in UK for my post graduation, and I was having ADSL connection of 24 Mbps unlimited data. And I was like, wow, this is great. And soon then I went to South Korea, and in South Korea, every home is, this was back in 2008, and every home back in 2008 was having 100 Mbps broadband. I was like, this is amazing. Why can't we have this in India? Finally, in 2009, 2010, I came to India, returned to India, and that at that point of time we were based in Mumbai. I went to few internet service providers in Mumbai and tried to understand why they are not doing peering. So in this post graduation, when working for British Telecom, then working for South Korean company, I understood that peering is required if you want to provide high speed broadband to the end users. So then I came to Mumbai. I realized that there is hardly anybody peering with anybody. So even at that point of time, sorry if I'm wrong here, Rahul, but even Airtel for that time was not peering with Google in Mumbai. This is back in 2009, 2010. And I was going around talking to internet service providers that you should peer, you should peer, you should peer. Nobody was listening to me. I mean, this guy, Ronak Maheshwari, somebody, instead of Tata Communications, and back then Tata Communications and all telcos back then used to sell like pure internet, no peering. To smaller internet service providers. So all of them were having this ego that I'm buying directly from Tata Communications. There's no peering. There's nothing like that. So this concept of peering was very difficult to sell. And I started my own internet service providers. I peered with all the peering providers. I showed to the internet service providers that peering works. It helps you. But then this was a small scale. In 2015-16, for some reasons, I landed in Delhi. And eventually some few ISPs listened to me, and this is how Extreme IX came into existence. Till 2014-15, broadband speeds in India were still 512 kbps with 10 GB volume data. This is just 10 years ago. From 2017-18 onwards, you have broadband players all across the country in all major towns providing at least 50 Mbps, if not more, unlimited broadband speeds. So my first customers, after I set up this exchange, were the ones who started providing high-speed broadband in Delhi NCR. This kind of changed the ecosystem. But why I did what I did was because I said, why in India we can't have similar 100 Mbps broadband speeds available? Till that time, again, Rahul may correct me if I'm wrong, but till 2018, Airtel was not very heavy on FTTH. It was still wanting to do ADSL, VDSL in Delhi NCR. So this is how things changed, and I did exchange because I knew this was the right thing to do, because I wanted broadband in India to change from 512 kbps to 100 mbps and beyond, because I saw the benefit when I was abroad during my studies or my career. So this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
So one of the things that I noticed that Ronak mentioned, Ajay mentioned, and even Rahul mentioned to a certain extent, the significance of internet exchanges and the reasons why ISPs should pair with them. Ronak was just talking about how previously there weren't that many ISPs, and according to ISOC's Pulse IXP tracker, India has 38 ISPs. And only 13.47% of local ISPs peer at internet exchanges. So, Amrita, I was thinking if you could take this, why do you think there are only 13 or like let's say 14 if we round it up percent ISPs that peer at IXs? It's on.
Okay. why there is only 12 to 13% of usage. Incidentally, Nixie says they have 79 internet exchange points in India. Operational, how many? I don't know, but that's the figure. Today morning, which I asked them. So I think Rahul and others can explain why we have about 12 to 13% traffic, because as far as we understand, and we just look at it from outside, people who actually operate know more. Most of the data flows within the telcos itself. They are not peering at the internet exchange points. That is one of the concerns which many of the internet exchange points raise, that not much data is flowing within their networks. As an example was given some time back, that it is moving out of the country and then at times even coming in, but it is not being peered in the country. So perhaps telcos may have their own rationale why they are not willing to peer or use these exchanges, and wanting to use their own infrastructure to move the data, and if required, they have lease lines within themselves to kind of share. So that's one of the concerns, because if you look at it, on one hand, we say that we want to have more internet exchange points, so that we reduce redundancy, we get the data more close to the users, etc. And it's been quite good for at least the tier 2, tier 3 cities, etc. But we are also seeing consolidation of the smaller ISPs. Like if you look at these smaller cities, the smaller ISPs are using the exchanges much more. But when we are seeing the consolidation of smaller ISPs happening or being taken over by bigger ISPs or / telcos, you really don't know how it's going to work out. But we've also seen some community networks being closed down because of the landscape which is happening. While Rahul did mention that yes, there needs to be uniformity in terms of quality of speed or security. I do, my limited understanding says that internet exchanges just help to transfer the data packets. They don't really have anything to do with what's flowing, what is not flowing. So, and definitely quality of standards are something which can be set. Obviously, certain telcos may require different quality of standards and some may have different, but some uniformity can come in. And I'm sure Ajay or Ronak can say that they do maintain some of, a certain baseline of quality of standards, etc. So what is expected from an ISP, expecting the same from an exchange point is difficult. If you look at India, when we are just having 12% of traffic flowing through internet exchange points, having a license for them doesn't make sense, in my opinion, primarily because an ISP or a telco, when they take a license, gets something in return. From a license, what is an IXP getting? And if you expect or send a note to an IXP to remove or take down one website, how can they do so? So you can't have the same rules for apples and peaches.
So we'll get to the licensing discussion in a bit, but I mean, broader question, Amrita, about why there isn't more peering taking place. Anurag, do you want
because
to
the
take that?
telcos are not finding value in exchanging, using the internet exchanges. They want the traffic to move through their own networks. That's what our understanding.
Sorry, before Anurag, maybe Rahul, why isn't it that there's not enough peering from telcos? Like, what's the thinking in the telco ecosystem?
I don't think there is a aversion to move to an IXP. That's not a correct statement. However, let me tell you that our networks do generate humongous amount of data, and given the spread and reach of the networks, we will have a subscriber sitting in Arunachal border, to a person sitting in Bombay, to we sitting us in Delhi, and we do consume data as a society. 26 GB per month, is per subscriber is what we are consuming, as a society. with that sort of data hungry nature of the requirement, there is an expectation which the customer builds in as to how is he going to experience the network. So if he goes onto your network, if he tries to access something, if he gets a buffer, it's a poor experience.
But the whole objective of IXPs is to improve that experience,
That's
right?
So let me complete my argument. Given that, we have got around, you mentioned a number. There are 120 edge data centers which we have, right? Most of them will house a CDN from a player, right? So that's really the point. So it's much easier for me to control that requirement of the customer and the latency by saying that why don't you sit out in my own edge data center and try to use, because my own network is consuming data and all my subscribers are consuming data. We have today, if I remember correctly, around 240 million subscribers who are on smartphones, right? Which means they do consume data every day. Now, if I can control that experience to give a particular quality of service to a customer, I would prefer to do that. Would I have gone through ISP? Yes. We are connected to ISP. Yes, we are connected. But if the person who is giving the data is also sure of being in that ecosystem, it helps out the cause for everybody, right? If Google today wants to say that I want to be sitting in Bombay for you to access, I want to be sitting in Gandhinagar if you want to access, it's a choice which the content provider is also making for himself. So it's really about the experience. I don't think it's something to say that I don't want to. Of course, why would I not want to? But if I can control that experience better for the customer, I think that's where we really are.
Would it, and let me ask a slightly tricky question. Sorry to just come to you, Anurag, because we're on this. Is it then a business model case for a telecom operator, I'm not talking about Airtel specifically, to ask for licensing of IXPs or to somehow create a restrictive framework for IXPs in the country so that more of hosting of data or caching shifts to the telecom ecosystem rather than externally integrating with IX? I'm just wondering because this was one of the things that used to happen historically at Nixie, and Anurag can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but Nixie did not interconnect directly with data centers and only through telecom operators because everyone on the board, and this is what I heard, was an ISP or a telecom operator, and they didn't want edge. They didn't want edge data center that are not hosted with telcos to connect to an internet exchange. They wanted them to be hosted with the telcos. And so, is it a business model situation? Like you, telcos want to make money and take money away from, let's say, independent IXPs.
I don't think so. I think large businesses don't operate on a model that they want to throttle anybody else to do their own business. That's not the way, at least.
Telcos did that for years with mobile value-added services.
Cannot be answering for what had happened in the past. I can really talk about what is happening now. We are part of Nixie ourselves. I mean, I can still choose to be one way or other. I think the bigger question to answer is not this. Bigger question to answer is, if you are a telco and if you are running such humongous networks, you do need to ensure a particular way of how you will ensure a quality. We have never said that we want a license for IXP. As I said, it's not my ask for a license. All I'm asking is that there should be a fair amount of assessment of how we are going to get the same experience for everybody. Because if you are going to say that data is paramount, that data is important, that data should be protected from a cyber sabotage, that data should, we should not have a malware sitting. We should put multiple checks on it. So like, give me an example. Today on my system, who will sit in the data? We have got a CERT, we have got a CDOT, we have got a CDOT IMS system, we have got a CERT IMS system. Besides that, there is a DOT mechanism to sit. So there are 5 or 6 people who are sitting on that data all the time, right? And I'm bearing, the cost of them sitting on my network and wanting to do whatever they want to do. I have nothing against that. All I'm saying is and the reason for that they say is security. Reason for that they say is quality. I'm saying, okay, fine. If it is that's the only standard we want to follow, then let's just make a guideline to say that, okay, we will have a threshold to say this is how it will look like, this is what the latency will look like, this is how the framework will look like. I don't want a license for anybody, but I do want a parity in terms of how we are going to treat data across various points in the same ecosystem. It's the only point we're making.
Can I respond to this one?
I was waiting for you.
Uh, sorry to give this analogy. I am giving an exaggerated point to actually make the point.
As long as it's not illegal for
Yeah,
you
it's
to
not
say.
illegal. It's not illegal.
We don't want to get into trouble there. That's
Yeah, no, it's not illegal.
The discussion in Nikhil's thing is we can say what we really want to say, and that's really the lovely part of this discussion.
So, just taking his point ahead, Rahul's point ahead, that there is data and a lot of people are sitting on that data. A lot of authorities for various reasons are wanting to have a look at that data, etc., etc. But this data also flows to the fiber. Sometimes this fiber is going through common conduits set up on the highway. So India is setting up fiber highways, etc., etc. So they're common conduits. Now, would you say that because data is also going in this common conduit through the fiber, I would like to have same regulations which are set up on layer 3 of the network, wherein actually you can listen to the data on the fiber conduits also. Right? This is not possible, right? This is illogical. Similarly, internet exchanges operate on a layer which is framing layer, which is switching layer. They have no visibility into the packet header. They have no ability to look at the packet header. So it is similar to a conduit in which common fiber is going. Similarly, through an internet exchange, also you can't really do it. Even if you put all those regulations, there is no ability to look into that IP packet header because switching happens at frame layer. So when you look at applying regulations and similar regulations across various different stacks, various different layers of the OSI stack, you need to be able to understand that what this stack can do. The physical layer where the actual wires are used, you can't do any listening, etc., etc. Similarly, you can't do anything on the switching layer. The only security that you can put is MAC layer security, and Anurag will be able to explain more, and Ajay here also will be able to explain more on that. But this is it. There is nothing else that can happen on switching layer.
I would just like to tell you, since we are a telco, if you go and study the requirements for me to light up a fiber and where it terminates, you will realize it requires me to go through a humongous security process. It requires me to get a clearance from an interministerial committee. That committee can take 6 to 9 months to even give you a clearance. Putting a cable landing station, I'm again exaggerating my case now, NLD, national fiber is still easier. A cable landing station can typically take you 2 years. And there are cases when I have joined, I will not name the networks. I have seen networks which intimated and they launched, and then 2 years down the line, we realized, oh, where is the clearance for this? And then to get a clearance for that took another 2 years. So I'm saying, I understand, and I'm all for it. I'm saying that, see, today you would be following some self-regulatory checks to maintain some quality, right? I'm sure every network.
So let's take quality separate. I mean, I think
Yeah.
what Ronak's broader point is,
It's very important.
he's saying you can't equivocate the two simply because they're not using. So I would say they're not using spectrum. They're not using fiber. They are a switch. You are you are a network service provider. You're actually taking spectrum. You are laying fiber. They're not doing any of this.
But as
How can you
NLD,
equivocate?
that's what I also do. I just carry traffic. What happens to me as a ILD? I just carry traffic. The fiber is coming internationally, lands to my cable landing station. It comes inside the country. Then it goes to a switch. I switch. It goes to a national fiber cable. It lands up to exchange, right?
Mike, I think Anurag wants to also say something, but
This, I'm sorry to intervene, Rahul. I really don't want to. I hate this, but the one
no,
bit
we are
of
all for a debate.
Yeah. See, debate without intervention will also happen, but really, I have to because see, when you are bringing traffic into the country, it goes to layer 3 where the link can actually see the packets. Now, if the regulator allows tomorrow to allow termination of the cable into a switching equipment, and then then the regulator also wants to listen to the switching equipment, it is technically infeasible. So because you are terminating at layer 3, you are controlling the router, you are terminating at layer 3. Hence, you have the ability to look at the routing packets, the IP headers. I am talking about if it was a switch where you have looking at only frame, you don't have that header information.
But tell me then, why would you require a CDOT or a search system to be sitting on a ISP? You shouldn't have that also. You should remove that. We shouldn't have any checks. Or, let me complete. We shouldn't have any checks on the national fiber network also. We should remove all that. We should look at only switch. We should look where it is generated on a network. We should look at a cable landing station. We should remove everything. And I'm saying absolutely right. We should. And that's what I really want. I'm saying if it is, it is. If it is not, it's not for anybody. That's the only point I'm trying to make. I completely agree with you, by the way. Right? In fact, if you see a large part of discourse for us for last few years has been to really talk about how we can simplify the things we are doing, because we are generating humongous. Tell me one thing today. This is the last discussion. Sorry, it's a closed door discussion, so I can say. So I had a discussion with
this is a recording. This will be
it's a recording.
published.
Anyway, so I had a discussion with few law enforcement agencies last week. Out of the total traffic which is generated, let's say 80% of traffic is video. Assume. Why would you want that traffic drop of the video to be monitored? What is the logic? What is the rationale? What are you going to do with it? See, I watched a YouTube or I watched a content on Netflix. How is it relevant for a law enforcement agency to tell me what are you watching? And for that, as an industry, we are paying nearly $500 million a year for the storage. For what? For videos, right? And this is my larger problem.
I agree, and all those are in HTTPS, so already encrypted, but the government says everything should be
Encryption
stored at least for 2
encryption
years.
reduces ability of the whole point of LIM to great extent. But anyway, that's beside the point. The one point around the security of, say, security at IXPs versus ISP, you need to make a differentiation, which is ISPs are supposed to identify end users, IXPs are not. I have two connections at my home, one from Airtel, one from a provider which is connected to Extreme, indirectly connected to Extreme. I can challenge you, if Airtel wants, they can figure out, they can identify my connection. Ronak cannot. He technically won't be able to, with the layer 2 switching, he won't be able to. So that's a big difference. Because of the end user identification, you need to have certain things in there, which includes, of course, CGNet logging and bunch of other infrastructure. I'm not taking the LIM in that part. LIM probably is a separate discussion, but there has to be certain identification policies where the burden goes on the ISP, which does not has to come on IXPs when you are sitting right in middle. So that's one part. The other part, I think initially you asked why the interconnection is relatively low, and I think this is the case which has been pointed out since morning, that it is low at the large telco scale, and somehow this is an incorrect understanding which is being going around. So large exchanges, and this includes, say, take the case of Decix in Frankfurt. Decix is not large because the local incumbent is peering there. Or say Equinix Singapore is not large because local incumbents are peering there. In all these cases, they have either closed or selective peering policy. Same with, say, Links in London or any other large exchange for that matter. Peering grows in these markets because of overall liberal policies, with one, that IXPs are open, they are allowed without license, and two, which is the circuit availability. As long as you have way to reach these IXPs with either with dark fiber or through buying from someone who has access to dark fiber in terms of buying wavelength, that matters a lot more than Airtel or Tata peering at these exchanges. Even if today, let's say Mr. Rahul goes and starts peering at, say, Extreme, the traffic volume would be tiny because majority of traffic is content to eyeballs. His network has very large number of eyeballs. His network may have some content which anyway is peered at these exchanges right now. So ISP to ISP traffic is going to be absolute negligible. Absolute. It would be literally a very, very tiny part of it. It may not even touch, say, 1% of the total traffic. So whether these networks peer at exchange or not impacts a lot more to content players who have to go and essentially buy either paid peering or say some other agreement to reach them. But for ISPs, it does not really matter. Indian low amount of peering in India is not because, say, large telcos are not peering. That's the case literally everywhere. Pick any large telco, any large market, incumbents have closed peering policy, and probably it should be left onto them. As long as there is no monopoly on the termination, it should be left onto their policy. If you have a situation where, say, certain markets have a monopoly on the termination, where you have only allowed one operator to build the last mile, and that's the only operator doing the last mile, and no one else can compete, then you can bring into those policies around, say, forced peering, or certain set of peering agreements in order. Outside of that, it's purely a market fair market thing.
I would like to add my 2 cents after all these intelligent people have added. So, why are telcos not peering in India? And as Anurag rightly mentions that, look at any large market and large incumbent where alternative ecosystem of broadband players is not existing, like in India. Our alternative ecosystem is providing broadband only to about, say, 3 or 4% of the households. We don't have enough content flowing from smaller ISPs to bigger ISPs. Yes, there were a few applications back in the day around 15, 16, 17, which used to have peer-to-peer kind of nature of traffic, which used to bring content from smaller ISPs to bigger ISPs. At that point of time, when Airtel was considering doing a POC, it actually did a POC with Extreme. And then it could not materialize into anything further because that particular technology died because of the OTTs. So there is no benefit right now. But see, liberalizing regulation will make the alternative ecosystem stronger. You will have more broadband penetration via the alternative ecosystem to everybody. And this is when the telcos will realize that there is enough traffic coming from the alternative ecosystem, and then they will come and peer with the exchanges. Till this happens in India, there is no incentive, immediate incentive for telcos to peer on the exchanges. So that is for any telco. But having said that, in the slides, I had also mentioned that in India about 75 to 80% of traffic is present for peering. The rest of the 20 to 25% is not present for peering. Out of that, approximately 5 to 10 is for small CDNs, very small CDNs. For example, CDN 77, Cache Mara, etc., types of very small CDNs. They are into very niche of their content delivery, and they, because of heavy regulatory requirement and high cost of deploying infra in all the telcos, and because of very little aggregation of telcos at a single point where they can provide data to all telcos, these small CDNs do not have any incentive to come to India. So what is happening is, as I showed you a slide in my presentation where the Indian telcos are peering outside India. They're not peering in India, but they are peering outside India. This is Frankfurt, Amsterdam, Los Angeles, New York, Palo Alto, Sao Paulo, Johannesburg, Singapore, Sydney, Hong Kong. These are the 10 locations where these global telcos are peering on the public exchanges. Now, why are they peering there but not peering here? And what will happen if they peer here, or they take a port on the private exchanges in the country, in India? Once this happens, the small CDNs whose traffic they are bringing at their own cost from these 10 locations, these small CDNs will get incentivized to come to India, start their infra in India and exchange traffic in India. But for some reason, this value is not yet enough value which can be expressed to the procurement teams of the telcos, and hence they are not wanting to peer in India.
So I agree with Raunak. So we in the Frankfurt, so from India, many telcos are there, and the content part, the small part are there. So they want to set up in India, but they ask that, do you have these telcos? Then we can come to India, because we do not have enough funds to take transit from all telcos. But we are serving their customers. So there are some chicken and egg concept in also there.
So, I mean, it sounds strange, but all of you seem to be agreeing with each other that you need to work together. But and yet at a regulatory level, it seems that everyone's at loggerheads.
See,
So why this dichotomy? I don't understand.
I think telco is this entire ecosystem is the prime example of co-opetition, right? You compete fiercely in the markets, but you also have to collaborate in the markets, because that's the only way this ecosystem works, right? You can have differences of how you approach it, but can you say that I want to be isolated in this ecosystem? The answer is no, you cannot be. So you have to find ways. And I think this old dogma of trying to say that I want to create something, it's my own, I think those structures have broken down. increasingly everybody realizes that nobody controls anything, right? So you have to see the best way to route your traffic. You have to see the best way to be able to manage it, because it is too much to manage, very honestly, right? So I think that's the real approach.
And just to add a simple joke here, I think me selling exchange to Rahul in Airtel is going to work better than me trying to sell it to their network people.
That's why I'm not in the networks.
So let's actually get into whether IXs fall within the scope of the Telecom Act to begin with. Amrita, I wanted to come to you here. Do they fall within the scope of the Telecommunication Act? And if not, then does the DOT even have jurisdiction over them?
Technically, DOT has said it falls under DOT's remit at this point of time. So, and they, as in, they have mandated a license. So, whether it actually falls under the definition is a different question, because in other places, it is not considered. So that is where the contention is at this point of time. The entire definition and the interpretations, there is a gap somewhere in it.
So in that sense, explain to me that if that definition applies to IXPs, according to DOT, how does it not apply to CDNs?
So that is where the dichotomy is, because if you look at the CDNs and the IXPs in this entire ecosystem is literally the same. They are providing content, they are helping to exchange traffic. So in my limited knowledge, they should not fall under that remit. And should not be licensed. So that is where the contention is. And that's
yet in the TRAI consultation paper, I don't remember who it was, but we noticed that there were folks who supported licensing for IXPs but opposed licensing for CDNs without a rationale for, in terms of just pure legal regulatory framework.
So I would say, this is, let me find a better word to say. I would say, who can lobby better? I couldn't find a more diplomatic answer, but I would say that's the bottom line. Whoever lobbied better could give that rationale. But if you look at it, and I'll go back to my first response, it is the entire regulatory regime for telecom in India which needs to be looked in. If you really want, for example, the small CDNs from outside to come in, or if you want the telecoms actually to work better, and not because it's a fight for them also with a lot of liabilities required and unrequired. Can we simplify processes? Will licensing an IXP help vis-a-vis? It's like you treat one child as your own and the other child as a stepdaughter. And in this case, the CDNs have been kept out of it and the IXPs have been kept. So we need to really relook at things with rational. And I think you need the people who really understand the networks and technology to be in the room. And it should not also be that I am being regulated, you also need to be regulated. That also would not help this ecosystem a lot. Rather, so I would say the definition is concerning because it leaves out one, it takes in someone into consideration.
Ajay, I wanted to come to you here because we've already had a conversation about this and I know you disagree with this. So what are your thoughts?
I personally disagree with it because
Could you raise the mic?
so internet exchange points and CDNs. So one side is the eyeballs, other side is the content. If government decides that the CDN should be also licensed, then they will decide where they should be present. So they have the funds, they can decide where they want to serve or they cannot serve by local or by transit. So I personally don't think that government should have the license for the CDNs. Otherwise, they will move out from the country, and the older age, every content should be coming by the transit links.
No, but
So-
Ajay, if I go by that rationale of yours, just because the CDNs have a lot of weightage today, keeping them out, and just because the IXPs just have 12% data flowing and they are the poor sisters in this entire game, they should be charged. That's also unfair, right?
No, I think what I'm hearing is CDN shouldn't be licensed because they can leave the country. IXPs should be licensed because they can't leave the country.
they have to serve the IS,
So that's what I'm saying. The poor
So,
kids have to be
I-
there. The
I-
rich ones can manage.
No, so just because you are in this country to serve this country means you need to be licensed. If you can leave, then no, we don't want you to leave, so we won't license you. That doesn't make rational
We cannot
sense.
survive without Google. We cannot survive without Microsoft. That is the fact. Fact remains fact.
No, but CDNs are not just run by them, right? There are other independent CDNs also across the world.
If you
Some of whom keep getting
no,
banned every
if
now
you
and then.
take the market share, how much content is used by which that CDN provider? So the small CDN provider already are outside. If you decide, they will decide where should they take the license and operate, or they serve via the transit links. That is my personal view.
Ronak, could you sort of share with us how IXP agreements between IXPs and other players in the ecosystem currently function, and what's going to change with an authorization?
Before
review?
coming to that, I would like to jump to the question of the domain of licensing of internet exchanges and whether they fall under DOT's jurisdiction at all. Of all the exchanges, I am the only one who is fighting Department of Telecom in a writ petition in Delhi High Court. So I kind of have more insights into the legal arguments also. There are many lawyers here.
You've taken a license as well, right?
Yes, we have taken a license as well, but not for exchange activities. Exchange activities. So coming to that, let me first answer this part. So in 2021, Government of India liberalized the definition of AGR, and they allowed non-telecom revenues also in telecom companies, which is deductible from the calculation of revenue, and hence the AGR is only applied for telecom revenues, pure telecom revenues. So this is when we realized, okay, Government of India has now liberated it, and then we took a license to provide license services. We are providing license services. It's a very small part of our revenue, but we are providing license services also. But coming to why exchange is outside the jurisdiction of Department of Telecom. So Department of Telecom is nodal office for practically three laws. Telegraph Act 1885, the WPC Act, and there's one more. These are the three acts that Department of Telecom is nodal office for. In all these three acts, which are currently in force, and the rules under that, which is unified license and the various sections of unified license, there is no definition of licensee or service provider in any of these documents. The definition of licensee and service provider is in TRA Act 1997, and DOT has no jurisdiction of TRA Act 1997. So TRA decides, and it is defined there on who is a licensee and who is a service provider. So there are lawyers here, and if I'm wrong, please contradict me. But this is my reading of it. I am also fighting a case in the court.
I will not completely agree with what you say. Yeah.
So now there is a set of definitions in TRA Act 1997, and some of them are also there are two of them, which is service provider and licensee. And now I will like to take you back to SNET versus VOM, the case which was put up by VOM against SNET in Delhi High Court. It was decided by Justice Endlaw, and Justice Endlaw wrote a beautiful judgment on that. He interpreted who is a licensee and who is a service provider very beautifully and very clearly in that. And as per that, enterprise entities who are not providing public telecommunication services are not licensees or service providers. This is clearly in the judgment. Now that judgment is not challenged. It was challenged in the division bench, but both the parties did not appear, so the judgment is still valid. So there is a judgment from Delhi High Court which interprets service provider and licensee, which says that entities not providing public telecommunication services are not service providers nor licensees. Now, this has not been challenged by anybody, and this is the law. So, as per that interpretation, internet exchanges and CDNs and all the entities which are not providing public telecommunication services are not licensees and are not under jurisdiction of DOT.
Okay. So just want to mention a few things. Number one, yes, I know there are a lot of lawyers here. So if you look at the definition of the word telegraph itself in the Indian Telegraph Act 1885, a good lawyer can very well argue that even telepathy needs a telecom license because after all, you are using hertz and waves.
I can add to a point. Even Mr. Just sir, let me just for reinforcing your point, sir. Nikhil is looking at us through glasses, and that makes him liable under Telegraph Act. Department of Telecom can actually come and ask Nikhil to take a license.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, that's one thing. Second thing is, I mean, there was a discussion of certain companies, many of them are involved in gaming. And so perhaps some of those CDNs are deliberately out of India, not so much because of the peering challenges or any other thing, but more because what is the confusion regarding gambling and gaming. And that's something where Nikhil has hosted multiple discussions elsewhere on that. So I think many of them, the considerations are not really about hosting in India because of peering or costing or anything like that. It's more to do with something else. The other aspect is, as I mentioned earlier in the pre-lunch session, one of the CDN has been connected with Nixie right from day one, which is an IC. Second thing is this. Earlier, there was only one IXP, Nixie, which is what started. And that time, Nixie's own rules were, because only ISPs at that point of time in 2003, not even telecom license, by the way, they were not allowed to offer internet at that point of time under that license. So only if, for example, even Airtel had a Mantra online service. So that was their ISP thing. Same way Tata had, others also had, but there was a different company, they had an ISP license and only those were connected to Nixie and not the rest of the stuff. The rest of the stuff happened only from 2006 onwards when their license ambit was expanded to include internet within the telecom license. So which was not the case earlier. And that's why only at that stage that so-called telcos were allowed to connect to Nixie. The CDN part, which Nixie sort of allowed much later, was again a decision within Nixie's board and not really mandated from DOT or TRI or anything else. And the other aspect is with respect to, I mean, you guys mentioned about this whole thing about lawful interception and other things. Okay.
Yeah, I just take a second to clarify on the power of the department. Of course, Deepak clarified on how the telegraph can be interpreted. See, the TRI Act 97 came much later. Before that itself, the license have been issued, from 94, 95 onwards. And that power is coming exclusively to the government because government is the owner of everything. And so it is authorized under law to operate telegraph services. It also has the power to issue licenses under such terms and conditions as it deems fit. So that's where the power comes to the department. The TRA Act, when it came out, was more to say if there is a service, what would be the terms and conditions of that service? That is what the power rests with the TRAI. That what will be the nature. That's why TRAI recommends to say there should be authorization for IXP. That's what the power of the TRAI is. But whether the authorization would be signed or not signed, or whether there would be a license or not, is something which the DOT will enact. That's the legal framework. I'm not trying to say there should be or not should be. This is the legal framework.
Yeah, Rahul, I am, well, I'm not a lawyer, but I understand judgment.
But
I understand.
I've done law all my life. That's the unfortunate part.
So but I understand judgment, and there is this judgment from Justice Endlaw and beautifully written judgment.
The Rajiv Endlaw judgment, I've read that, yes.
Yes, so that clearly, says, now this judgment is of 2012. And it clearly says who service provider is, who a licensee is, and what are the powers of DOT and what are the powers of TRAI. So now, since it has not been challenged by anybody, and this is valid, so I will go by the interpretation of Justice Endlaw and Delhi High Court without anybody. I mean, everyone, people have their right to disagree with the judgment, but this judgment is valid and it applies to everybody.
So, this reminds me of one of the debates that we had during net neutrality. I had argued that if every single app and website in this country can be allocated spectrum and allowed to service consumers directly, uh, we don't need net neutrality, and you can have licensing of every app in this country. But the fact is that is not feasible, right? So telecom operators are essentially aggregators and they have exclusive rights to spectrum. And so therefore, because they have exclusive rights to spectrum in public interest, they have to follow a public interest mandate that can be enforced through a regulation and a law. And that includes, for example, right now it's under forbearance pricing practices, whether it is. So the fact is that IXPs in this licensing ecosystem actually they're not using public resources, they're not getting any benefit from this authorization framework, only a burden. In case of telecom operators, you can argue that they are getting a benefit in terms of getting exclusive access to spectrum, that is for the bands that they have got. Right?
Not the case with ISP.
Sorry?
ISP doesn't get any
So
spectrum.
in that case, they have the ability to get right of way for the delivery, right? So, but in this case, it's just a switch. There is no benefit to them. So that again, that equivocation between the two doesn't make sense. Just like the equivocation of at that point in time between telecom operators and internet services doesn't make sense. I mean, this is just my limited point saying that I wanted to understand uh, from both Ajay and Ronak and Anurag about what do you see happening uh, as an impact of the licensing going forward, and is it going to be is there any positive uh, that comes out of it for you guys, or from what you can see? Like, is there anywhere where there has been a positive impact of an authorization framework or a licensing framework for IXPs in the world? Or does this make your life any easier? Does it give you some amount of legitimacy? Does it allow you to, so for example, work better with certain providers? Is there any benefit and is there any damage?
I personally don't.
Could you
I don't personally see any benefit of it because nothing is going to change or nothing changing the license to authorization. The word, only thing is the words change, but all other rules are the same. So as a internet exchange, as a ISP, all terms and conditions will be same. In that there will be a small benefit of some small registration fees or something which we have already incurred.
But you were literally the first to take a license, right?
Yes.
Why did you take the license? You didn't need to do it.
No, as per my interpretation of the Telecom Act, if anything involves the public infrastructure roads, if we are in a building serving a customers, then there is no license requirement. If we are interconnecting different building where roads are involved and where our traffic is flowing, then there should be license.
That's not your infrastructure, right?
No, but
you're not laying cables.
no, we are taking the dark fiber. We are letting that dark fiber. Then that is our infrastructure. So
Are you renting it or do you own it?
no, we are renting it. But
then you don't. If you don't own it,
IP1 service provider cannot let that fiber. So as per my understanding, that if you use the public infrastructure, the road are involved in between, and your traffic is flowing from one place to other place, then that comes under the Telecom Act, and you have to take that license. So that's why we took that license.
okay. Anurag, sorry. So the mic here, please.
Yes.
So irrespective of, the entity that's lighting the network will need to have a license. If you're working directly on just dark fibers and you're leasing it out to somebody and they are lighting it, that person or the entity that's lighting that network will need a license. So I stand with that as
That's your legal interpretation as a lawyer. Anurag, then they will say.
So I don't have much to say on the regulation front.
But benefits, harms.
I'm personally against the idea of regulating exchanges. It does not add any value. It will just add on to complexity of operating an exchange point. It will add on to the cost. It will also make things complex because you have a lot of content players which are based outside of the country. as of now. And if you bring exchanges under regulation, you will have a scenario where you would be required to do KYC, you would be required to do bunch of things as you would do, say, in an ISP like license, and it won't really add any value there. On the security front, again, as I stated, telecom players have a requirement to identify end users, and rightfully so. There have been millions of cases which have been solved by identifying end users with IP addresses, and also they have separate requirement that does not really touches IXPs. On the quality of service, I think it should probably be left on to the market forces. If one exchange screws up pretty badly, you'll go to other exchange. If both of them screw up pretty badly and it's an open market, you will have third player showing up with a new exchange which would be doing better. So it should probably be left on to the market forces. People always have alternative. They always have alternative to take bilateral peerings over PNIs. They have alternate to take transit if the exchange quality is very bad. So I don't think license as such is required to enforce quality.
Is there a market failure in interconnection in India?
I think market failure has less to do with, say, IXPs themselves. It has more to do with their circuit availability. I think the success or the failure of IXPs depend a lot more on how, in a diverse country like India, people can get circuits to reach IXPs. So whether it's, say, decades or it's extreme, people need to get access to circuits in the form of, say, dark fiber or lit fiber. I think that availability is still quite poor once you go beyond, say, a radius of 200, 300 kilometers. The cost of NLD happens to be a bit high. And once you touch those costs, you end up in doing the calculation whether transit is cheaper or whether IX is cheaper. How much it is cheaper if you add on to the other cost of, say, having a colocation and other things. Again, market forces. I think IXPs will do much better if there is more focus on making the capacity available either through private players or, of course, with projects like, say, NOFN or a bunch of other dark fiber based projects. If they start routing bit of fiber towards large data centers where these exchanges are running, as long as that is available, that would have 1,000 times more impact than, say, having large incumbents to peer or not peer. For small ISPs, they have zero effect whether large incumbents are peering. They have more effect whether the large incumbents as well as other players, whether it's NOFN or Power Grid or Railtel or Gale, whether they are giving access to circuits to these data centers.
So what do you think is going to be a negative impact of the licensing framework?
It will add on to the cost, the whole compliance cost. It will be problematic. Other part of problem, as I stated, there are some genuine concerns. Like in the morning, I was having this chat with Ajay, which is India has much fewer root servers, and one part of the problem of root servers is ISPs are not open to give them connectivity because all of these are from non-for-profit organizations. ISPs can't easily do a KYC for them, and many are just afraid to give them connectivity, even though it's negligible. It's maybe 10 or 20 or even 100 meg kind of capacity. But ISPs are not willing to do that, just coming from the telecom compliance. If you add on to the IX compliance, you will find smaller CDNs going out. Smaller CDNs, even the ones who are not there yet and might be thinking, they would think twice before coming in there. The other part which was mentioned on the lit fiber, that's the other challenge which many CDN players have. That's probably would have again a bigger impact. CDNs and content companies, they cannot lit fiber on their own, so they have to go with a licensed partner, and this has been a case for a very long time. And this overall impacts industry pretty badly. In most of other large markets where IXPs are successful, you will find people would have access to dark fiber. They can lit fiber without essentially having a license between buildings, between their on pops or between, say, a pop in one building and adjoining customer pop in the other building. So those policies would have much larger impact than IX regulation. Overall, if it happens, it would have negative effect. It would just add on to the threshold essentially on the compliance side.
Debashish? So just before I forget, there are a couple of things that we still have left to discuss. One, Amrita, I'd like you to talk a little bit about community IXPs and what's happening there and what impact this might have. But I also wanted to inquire about, we understood that the ability to identify users doesn't exist and maybe lawful interception doesn't exist. But one other requirement is that there should be content blocking at IXPs, and whether that is possible or feasible. And to that extent, Debashish, I'm just wondering, and maybe someone else can also talk about this, does the regulator even understand the distinction between an IXP and an ISP in that sense? If content blocking is not feasible, if lawful interception is not feasible, how are those requirements making it to a set of recommendations?
Okay, thank you very much, Nikhil, for permitting me to join this forum. I wish to apologize that I was a little late in joining. Sincere apologies. I have a bunch of issues which I'll talk about, addressing your basic question and a few other questions that have been asked before this. I may sound a little different or a bit contrarian to some of the views that have been expressed in this gathering, but let me start somewhere. First of all, licensing issue of IXPs. It's a major issue. I mean, okay, till the TRAI announced their service authorization, the network authorization in February this year, there was no license on the IXPs. Those who had like DESIX who had a license, that was a ISP license. That is not an IXP license. So let us be clear about the nomenclature. That is a different license altogether. And I'm sure many who are sitting here also have an ISP license in addition to the fact that they're running internet exchanges. So first point is, does the IXP need to be licensed? In our opinion, in BIF's opinion, answer is clear no, because it does not use any scarce resources and does not have any exclusive rights which are associated with licensing in our country. And these are 4 exclusive rights.
So there are 2 points that have been made to counter that.
Yep.
Ajay made it, and so the fact that you need a license to light a dark fiber is an argument, and Ronak is going to contest some of this, I guess. But
No, this particular argument that so this is an activity. For this activity, you may require a license, but for exchange activity, do you require a license? So what Ajay said is, because he is connecting one building to another building using a dark fiber, which he needs to lit, he needs to have license because he wants to lit the dark fiber. So
Understood.
activity is different.
Yeah.
Whether the license is required to do exchange activity, this is what Devu sir is answering,
Yes.
that it is not required. There are 2 different activities here.
fair enough. Thank you for that.
It does not
clarification.
fall under the ambit of the internet exchange points, which
Correct.
we are discussing here, right? So there are other associated activities for which licenses or registrations are already in place. So first point, that is that our answer is clear no. What are these negatives of this? I mean, if you do license as TRAI has recommended, what is the negative? The negatives are very clear. He's spoken about increased costs, but I think increased cost is only one part of it. There are many other issues. The internet performance of the internet itself will go down simply because I would now have to since I have to do a number of compliances, I would have to, my costs would not only increase, but the time taken to actually connect between 2 exchanges and also the latency involved will also go down, will also go up as a result of this. So there is going to be deterioration in the internet performance and ultimately the consumer experience, which is most important. The consumer is going to get harmed at the end of the day. So we need to be very clear as to what are the negatives of the regulating the IXPs. That is the first point. The second, of course, is that the moment you start regulating a sector, innovations always go down. The possibility of innovations within the sector will obviously go down. And as a result of which, the investment into that particular sector, sector will also go down. So you are going to see only negatives out of this regulation that TRAI has proposed. So this is my first point, that the internet exchange IXPs do not deserve to be regulated. There is no market failure in the internet exchange point ecosystem, which deserves that TRAI TRAI recommend what they have, and for DOT to accept what TRAI has done. This is the first point. The second point I wish to make is, there is this, as a part of the authorization from TRAI, they've also recommended content blocking, content filtering to be done by the IXPs. It's a layer 2 Ethernet switch. A layer 2 Ethernet switch does not have the capability to do content blocking and content filtering. It is not possible. It can only up to, at layer 7, you can do all this. So there is I would not even go that far to say whether they have the understanding or not. But the fact is that it is completely out of place to expect a layer 2 switch. Technically, it is not feasible, not possible. So the question of getting it done through an IXP does not arise. So therefore, it has to be withdrawn by DOT. So I hope DOT will do justice to the representations that have been made on this. There was a third point that you spoke about.
That is about community IXPs.
Sorry.
So
I would not get into
but
that.
I was,
with us,
but I wanted to understand the content blocking piece. Anyone else? And Rahul, I believe you were reacting to something that Devashish had said about the license part.
No, as I think I already
Or
addressed.
authorization as it's now
Yeah,
called.
yeah. I already addressed that. I thought when
Yeah.
we started out.
Yeah.
As I said, I'm not in for any license. I don't want any authorization. What I do want is a clear threshold which is applicable to the way each data point is treated in this country. Right? So if data is to be treated securely, has to be treated robustly, then there is a threshold you create for security. If there is a particular quality of service earmarked the way the data will flow, it should also be applicable to any point which is flowing in that ecosystem. To that end, if we require a framework, if we require a guideline, if we require a authorization.
Why do you need a set of quality
Because
hear me out. For what is essentially just a switch.
Why do you have a quality of service for an NLD switch? Remove that. Why do you mandate to me that when you try to access something on a network?
Fair enough.
I agree.
So then,
and that's what I've been arguing. But I'm saying if you are going to subject some part of the ecosystem to a different benchmark, then there's a time to do a larger debate. Either we have it or we don't have it.
You haven't said the magic words.
No, I don't need to.
Your magic words are
you
level.
Imply a lot of things and not
Your magic
specific.
words are level playing field. Go on.
Reach
Say
there.
it. I know you want to say it.
Thank you. I was trying to avoid, but since you have. No, but honestly, as I said, see, the idea is absolutely not to seek any licensing. Let me tell you honestly, on the other way side. I today have a license, right? Signed with the department for years together. We are going into a new telecom act. I am getting into authorization myself. I would have preferred to be under license. I'll tell you why. Because it was a contractual treatment between me and the other party. Today, I am going to be subject to a law and I will be governed by a rule. Tomorrow morning, anybody can decide to completely change that rule and I am subject to a new rule. Right? Honestly, this is where I am. So I am actually in a situation which is worse off than anybody else. But I'm saying that let's define common set of rules of how we are going to govern internet, make it more efficient to the customer, make it more better for the customer, make it more secure for the customer. Whether that requires a rehaul of the way we are looking at it, so be it.
Content blocking? Possible?
Not possible.
As well.
So I'm saying I just have a view. I don't know right or wrong. I'm not a technical guy, so I
there
would not.
the four technical.
Yeah, I just
guys,
have a point of view here. And as I said, I'll
In
stand
fact, if you look at our
technically corrected if I'm wrong.
if you look at our representations to Department of Telecom,
Yeah.
we are even arguing, saying that even at layer 3, where the internet service providers operate, most of the content which has now become HTTPS, the layer 3 cannot read that. It is at layer 4 or even higher application layers where. So basically now, if you want to block a content in the country, you need to go to the CDN and tell them that guys, this content is blocked. They are the ones. They are the originators. We have to block it.
Which will take us to a very different point, which we've been in discuss. I think what happened.
Even ISOC, for that matter, has a recommendation. Either ISOC or ITU, probably, I don't know. Maybe it is ISOC who has a recommendation saying that if the content blocking has to happen, it has to happen at the source.
Sorry. Okay. So if it's okay, we'll go a little bit beyond time.
I want to
today,
address.
but you want to address.
I want to address the point of how licensing for exchanges or even authorization for exchanges is going to harm the ecosystem. The larger point here is, it started with the question on why private exchanges exist. It is to improve the broadband ecosystem in the country. And we saw how since 2015 onwards, since the private exchanges started expanding in the country, you are now having in every tier 2, tier 3 town, at least 3 or 4 internet service providers who are providing 100 Mbps broadband and beyond. This was not visible till 2018. Now, there are about 1,500 population centers in the country. This is 2011 census. 1,500 population centers in the country which have more than 50,000 households. We want to connect. So Digital India's vision and Viksit Bharat's vision is that we want to connect all the households to high-speed broadband, which is required. Now, imagine average utilization of bandwidth being 10 Mbps per household by 2030. This is going to come. So this particular city or population center having 50,000 households is going to require 500 gigs of capacity being transferred to the users. Now, where is this going to come from? Do we have fiber highways having such capacity anywhere in the world which can give such kind of speeds to 1,500 locations? No. So you need exchanges, you need CDNs. And I am sure out of this 1,500 locations, not many will be profitable for private exchange to start. So this will require community exchanges. Community exchanges do not have any structure. There's no private limited company. There's nothing. There's no company at all. Not even a proprietor. Somebody. So how community exchanges start is one college or one university deciding to put up a switch, and the service providers in that city connecting to it, and then the CDNs start coming to. This is how HKIX started. Even BBIX in Japan started this way. Many exchanges currently, which are big exchanges in the in the world, started as a community exchange. So if you want to deliver 10 Mbps broadband by 2047 to all the households in the country, without if you have this authorization structure in place, community exchanges are wiped out. They cannot exist. We have I don't know whether Mr. Satish is still here. He's running a community exchange, Amravati IX in Amravati. I met him earlier here. Okay, so see again now he's also having similar licensing issues like I am having, like many other exchanges are having, and he's looking at this question on why should I not close it down. So this is good. If the authorization for exchanges comes, or licensing for exchanges comes in, community exchanges are out of question. Out of this 1,500 locations, exchanges will only remain in about 100 or 200 locations, not more than that. So broadband, the way we want it to propagate in the country, is not going to happen without these things.
Gusab has been waiting for a while.
Oh. Hi. My question is slightly basic and it deals with the current law rather than Telegraph Act and the. Sorry. Right. But on the question of Telecom Act, I'm going to begin with a premise that BIF vehemently disagrees with, which is that over-the-top communication services and over-the-top streaming services are covered by Telecom Act. I'll begin with that premise. If that is truly the case, if we are to read the definition of message, telecommunication and telecommunication network, why are CDNs and internet exchanges also not covered under Section 3, which is the need for an authorization/license? That is number one.
Can we do one by one, Aditi?
Oh, sure.
Because the counterpoint to that is what Aditi is also trying to say, that if, as Mr. Vaishnav said, that the OTTs are not covered, then logically, why are these covered? Same question.
Nikhil, but there I will also add a caveat. Mr. Vaishnav made that statement to
the
Economic Times. It was not made on the floor of the parliament.
Correct. And
so it's meaningless.
Fair enough.
And there is a fair amount of discussion both within DOT and TRAI about it, where most people do believe that the door has been left open for OTT communication services and OTT streaming platforms to be regulated via the Telecom Act because the definitions allow for that. So why are CDNs and internet exchanges then, assuming this is the case, and I know BIF has a completely different position, I understand that, why are CDNs and internet exchanges not included in that?
Who's this question for?
Anybody.
For Debashish, because you mentioned the IS position.
If I know their position, I know their position. So.
Yeah, very strong views. First of all, we are not against regulation. We believe OTTs are already regulated. There is no need for over-regulation. That is what we are against. OTTs are regulated by the IT Act and they are governed under MeitY. They all come under, and for the content part, it goes to MIB. So there is no argument on that. As far as bringing them under the ambit of the Telecom Act, the question that our counter question that we have is why? Why do we need to bring it under the Telecom Act? It's just that the telecom service providers are bundling the OTT packages and giving more value to their customers for the money that they spend. So it is not that the OTTs are forcing themselves to and dying back or falling backwards to get the TSPs to actually bundle that. They are very happy doing what they are doing. So it is therefore it's not a push kind of an approach. It's a pull kind of a approach. It's a market driven thing where the consumers of the telcos themselves are asking for the OTTs. So I don't see any reason why the OTT should be regulated under the Telecom Act when they're already regulated for all the right reasons,
So
including security.
So
Sorry.
there was the underlying question in Aditi's question
CDNs.
is that is there an intelligible differential between CDNs
And IXP.
IXPs and OTTs?
Okay. So good news is for you is that the TRAI has already recommended authorization for the IXPs, which we are contesting seriously. We believe it doesn't add up in any way because it does not provide any unique value. On the contrary, the value to the customer goes down. The cost of the internet accessing the internet goes up, and also it hinders investment and any innovations in the sector. So IXPs are out.
I get that.
CDNs and are, as I mentioned earlier, they also fall under the same category. We believe that the CDNs are only providing what is called access to the content, and since the content is already regulated, CDNs by just regulating the CDNs, you're not creating any new value for neither for the customer nor for the service provider. So why do we want to do it at the end of the day? Is there a market failure which you are trying to address by regulating CDNs, or you just want to bring everybody under the ambit of regulation, be it whatever? Tomorrow you can ask the Ericsson and Cisco's and the Nokias for their switches also should be regulated. Why not?
There was already, I think Business Standard had an article about it where some of the software that is to be used by Nokia's and Ericsson's of the world has to be first vetted by DOT. I think that's already happening.
That's already there.
Let me tell you, it's not just the software. There is a national security
Correct.
portal. They have to get registered. The equipment has to go through a MTCTE approval, a TC certification before anything comes out.
So
Right
that-
now, and let me try to address the point which you are making. I think your observation is very correct. If one were to interpret that OTTs are in an ambit, the way it is worded right now, and by the way, we are not saying it is, right? We have been told it is not, it's fine. But if it is to be interpreted that it is, then it is equally applicable to CDNs also. If you just read the pure English of it,
Yeah.
right? It's very widely worded right now. It can lead to a lot of confusion. And the problem with English is that it is interpreted differently in different points in time. My friend mentioned about Justice Rajiv Enlaw's judgment. You can look back in history and you can look at a judgment and you can interpret, a lot of things which arise. But I can't leave the floor without addressing my friend Devashi's falling backwards to get the OTT comment. Well, if there is no network, there is no OTT also, right? That's where I would just leave it. It's not so simple. I'm not falling backward, but are you falling forward to meet the network, right? Are you? Is the question. It's a system which is mutual, right? If there is no network rollout, there is no penetration of digital infrastructure. If there is no content to run on those networks, is also a problem. So there is no one-on-one upship to say that I am there and you are there. No, it's not. Everybody gains in the ecosystem. Is how it is.
Rahul, so my question is whether a CDN and an internet exchange is part of the telecommunication network or not. Would you consider it a part of telecom network
As I said,
as per the definition?
as I said, in the conversations which anybody have had with the department formally or informally, this lacuna has been pointed out that the way the wording is right now, it can have various different meanings. And you have yourself mentioned what was mentioned by Honorable Minister the way he mentioned it. But there is no clarification which came ever. And also on the other side, there is no move which has come from the department to say that they want to do something or not. So that's where it basically is, right? One can argue both ways, but today there is nothing to say that it is being interpreted like that.
Ronak, I can see that you want to answer. If you can also answer this one question, which is about whether internet exchanges are intermediaries as under the Information Technology Act, and how does that, for instance, affect content blocking vis-a-vis Section 69A? Because Section 69A applies to all intermediaries, which would then include your not just your Facebooks and Googles of the world, but also your internet service providers, your CDNs. Arguably, I would argue that internet exchanges are also intermediaries. So
Yeah.
you probably
I
covered
think,
there.
yeah, I think no, this is an overreach of the understanding of Information Technology Act and its jurisdiction. Its Information Technology Act's jurisdiction does not cover telecommunication networks as intermediaries.
Rahul, I think, disagrees, and in
Actually,
practice,
Ronak, it
it
does.
is covered. It is
but
covered.
I think an argument can be made that if it is not technically feasible for you to do these things, then you cannot be required to do them.
Yes, that is one. And secondly,
Like WhatsApp.
Aditi, I will, but
you
let me
can't
first address the.
Can I just finish one point? But you can't say that you're a telecommunication network for the purpose of the IT Act and an intermediary for the purpose of the Telecom Act.
I am not even saying that I am intermediary for the purpose of Telecommunication Act. What I am here saying is, now because you started with the definition of telecommunication network, now in the Act, Section 2S defines telecommunication network as systems or series of systems of telecommunication equipment or infrastructure intended for providing telecommunication services. My question here is, what is the definition of telecommunication service?
You have to go to the definition of telecommunication, which is at the heart of the definition.
Yeah, which is right. So exchange by itself is not providing telecommunication service.
It's not about provision. It means transmission, emission, or reception of
It
any
does not
message.
do any of these things.
Transmission, you can argue.
No, it does not do any of these things.
Exchange point can be argued to be a transmission.
No, exchange point does not. Exchange point does not transmit.
I mean, I've got Brigadier Penman sitting here.
So this
A radio is just a transmission. It's just like
with respect to definition of telecommunication network in the new act, internet exchange does not fall in under that definition.
I think we can have a leak. But I just want to answer your question in a different way. See, I think where we started was, what is the most efficient way to do things, right? Because we are going to have humongous amount of this data churning out. If you have got a blocking order to be implemented, would you rather go to 200 people, or would you rather go to the source and say, boss, it's coming from there. Why don't you just block it here and save the work for 200 people out here? Right? That's where, I mean, that's one way to look at it. It's the efficient way to look at it.
It
right?
also boils down to technical feasibility, right?
So it does. But I'm saying that I'm just purely trying to answer that if you got like to approach 200 people rather than approach just one party to say it is coming from you, why don't you just shut it down from here? Right? It makes the task easier. See, it translates back to Nikhil to the point. See, there are today, let's say 200 ISPs. All of them are not at the same level of infrastructure or feasibility of being able to set up infrastructure. For a large telco, very easy. Blocking order comes, automated system, punch in the system, block it. But for a smaller player, it's a work. He's not even sitting 24/7. And last few days, last month, there was humongous activity happening in the nights. You know what was happening on the networks.
So
there were blocking orders coming like hundreds in each night.
So isn't it easier than go to 4 or 5 ISPs rather than go to?
Why not go to the CDN and say, so block it from there?
So again, on the CDN thing, and Gusabadam, just if you'll just allow me, Tanya, you want to talk about La Liga?
Yes, I had actually wanted to talk about it for a while. So recently, La Liga took Cloudflare to court in Spain and got it blocked because they alleged that Cloudflare's VPN was basically allowing people to pirate its content. So Cloudflare's VPN used the same DNS as the whole service.
Cloudflare's VPN is basically a DNS in an app. That's all it is.
So that move basically caused Cloudflare to be blocked in the country. So should interconnection entities like CDNs and IXPs actually censor content when needed? How does the network operation get impacted because of it is what I wanted to understand in the context of the example that I've just given.
With respect to internet exchange, see, if I get a order saying block Google, I can shut down Google Sports. This is all I can do. Nothing else. So if they come and tell me, it's like, please block YouTube video which is showing some yoga poses not well done, I have no ability to do it. This is with YouTube. So, for example, a lot of during last few days, we have seen number of examples of Twitter being asked to block certain tweets in India. Only Twitter has that ability. Nobody else, no, not even Airtel or telcos of the world or anybody else in below application layer would have the ability to block one particular tweet. That does not happen.
No, but actually they can block a particular URL.
No, no. If it is HTTPS URL, they cannot block it. There's no way. You can block the entire. For example, if there is a HTTPS URL which says of that you block this particular video of YouTube, if at layer 3 we try to do it, the entire YouTube will get blocked.
Yeah.
Yeah, just wanted to add on the blocking front. So Ronak is right in there that because of HTTPS, you cannot block individual URLs. Before HTTPS world, and this was not that far off, it was probably until 2014, 15, a lot of websites were still on HTTP.
We used to get John Doe orders for blocking en masse.
Yeah,
Yes.
in that scenario, you would see the actual name. So you see domain.com/1 versus domain.com/2, and you can block one of them. As of now, you cannot. Now, whether you should go to CDN or not depends on the use case. So for tweets or YouTube videos, of course, they are large companies. You don't want to block the entire domain, and you would go to them. But at the same time, there is another category which government tries to block, and genuinely so, various threat actors based outside of India who are writing against India or supporting specific movements of breaking India, right? In those scenarios, most of those websites are located outside of the country, and in that scenario, of course, they won't be that easier to be blocked by just reaching to the source. And many of them would not really go to a large commercial CDN. These are like low traffic websites. So in that scenario, of course, they can be blocked at gateway level. They can be blocked by various ILD players or bunch of ISPs who are essentially connecting India to the outside world. So once you cover that along with the social media blocking, I think that probably covers 99.9% of the cases. I personally cannot imagine any
Going
remaining
back
case.
to an earlier question, Anurag, do you think that they're conflating ISP and IXP?
Possibly. At IXP level, of course, there's not much to block. At IXP level, all they would see is just packets flowing, the frames flowing, essentially. They would just see who is sending how much traffic. Beyond that point, they can tap, or if they badly want to, they can mirror ports and tap into things. But then it's all mostly encrypted traffic. As of now, most of the OTT content is all encrypted. Almost all the chat messaging apps are encrypted. What is not end-to-end encrypted is still at least encrypted with TLS. So there's too little IXP can do by sitting in middle and say tapping at the packets. They won't really see that much of the thing.
The encapsulation will also not allow us to do anything with the frames.
Yeah.
So there is no ability that the switch can have to block anything. The only thing that I can do is if the government tells me, guys, you need to shut down Google Sports, I can do that. I can shut down Google Sports. That's it. But then the entire Google gets blocked.
Gusabat's been waiting a while. You wanted to talk about blocking also.
Yeah, on the blocking point, yeah, fully agree. I think the government is also considering what is proportionate to block at what level. And so, Ronak, to your point of like ISPs also not having that role, it is actually like possible for ISPs to do targeted blocking on domains, right? Like either through DNS or through the SNI and TLS flows.
See, there are workarounds. See, if somebody wants to do, if they do blocking on DNS level, there are workarounds.
Sure.
To that.
I mean,
so if you want to have a short way of getting it blocked, it needs to be blocked at the source.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, there are considerations at play, right? Like whether the host will actually receive my request and block it or not. So that's why many requests go to ISPs, and this happens. On to I will bring in my father for a second to make a point. He often, brags or complains that he had to walk 10 kilometers and carry like, 10, 20, 30 kilos to just reach school and come back. And my school was 1 kilometer away and I had a bus. So in this sense, parity doesn't mean that I have to circle around the block, and carry 30 kilos of rocks because he wants to see parity with me. I think obligations on telecom service providers are really onerous and unfair. But it is also unfair to say that we want a level playing field and IXP should also have them.
Would your father go on a bus today?
Yeah,
Would he go still walking or on bus today?
I can't speak for.
Similar treatment. If he was you today,
Yeah,
you would expect
exactly.
treatment.
I have different.
If you are
is the point. I have different problems. Is the point. But also, you are making this point about quality of service and security, that you want some minimum standards, etc. But I feel like you haven't articulated what those are. And have you seen any instance of, we have Extreme and D6 here? Can we take? And like, what sort of standards? Have you seen any failure by internet exchanges in India
that's
to
actually-
like, yeah.
I was going to ask the same thing, that have we seen any, so let's take security separate because we just discussed security. But on the other front,
Security way, not the.
fair enough, but on the other front, have we seen any market failure at all?
A market failure point I would like to address. I mean, see, currently we are having only about 13% of traffic as per statistics exchange via the IXPs. There is only 13% of traffic that is exchanged via the IXPs. I doubt that figure also, by the way. It's not even 13%. That is way too high. Between me, Decix and Nixie, it is approximately 7 terabits of traffic that we are exchanging, and 7 terabits versus, say, from what I understand with respect to the traffic flowing towards the end users, it is approximately 80 to 90 terabits or more than that in the country right now every day. So out of that, if we are doing 7 terabits, is not even say 7, 8, 9%, not more than that. So market is already failed. मतलब क्या चाहते क्या हो आप लोग करना?
Not in the security or quality of service.
Okay, so look, we are kind of running out of time. So just,
I just wanna
do you
make
have
one
any
very-
compelling questions?
Yeah, very, very important question.
And-
Now, this is me playing the devil's advocate because you've talked about market failure, you've talked about smaller IXPs shutting down, and
I'm just going to say that we'll take another 15 minutes more. So in case anyone has any comments or questions, you can come in. I'm sorry, this has been a very engaging discussion, so we didn't move. We'll come to you. Just let
yeah.
finish.
So this idea has been proposed and rejected, but should the government consider mandating IXPs to peer at IXs, given the fact that you guys will have to go through an authorization?
I'll go first for that. See, if government steps in anything, it destroys it. So let's not do that.
There should not be mandate, the market decides.
I think it should be the market deciding rather than jumping into things and at times in over enthusiasm trying to ruin things further.
Anurag, are there any models similar to compulsory or forced peering in India? How effective has it been to ask ISPs to peer at specific IXs?
So before that, on the point about whether there should be forced mandated peering, again, I'm on board with everyone else. It would be a bad idea because it's easier to leave it onto the market forces. There have been number of cases. Take for instance in Western Europe, many networks start with peering and they go to a point where they say, oh, the added value is too little. Let's just go for transit. There can be certain markets where they would say the cost of cross connects is too high and we are just fine with one or two transit providers. So I think it should all be left on to the market forces, because if you leave it that way, things would auto correct. If the whole agenda is just to make peering work, you will go on to the other side, which will just increase onto the cost, compliance cost and mandated cost. On your question about mandated peering, I think it happens in certain scenarios where networks have the termination monopoly, as I was stating earlier. There have been certain markets where you have monopoly telecom operators holding the entire last mile, and they are essentially under the by law required to open up and peer. As far as I know, that's not the case. Anyone on the panel can correct me, but I don't think any of the Indian telcos have this sort of monopoly termination behavior in any market, like any city or any municipality where only they are present and no one else can come in. If that's the case, sure, one can go for mandated peering. Else, I think it should be left all onto the market forces.
But are there requirements to sort of say peer with Nixie or any other IX? In India, I mean.
I think I don't think there's requirement from DOT side, if I'm not mistaken. But usually that sort of requirement comes up in various tender documents. I've seen various tender documents where it would say you are required to do X, Y, and Z, and there it would say you must be connected to at least one or multiple Nixie nodes, and that's how many of the operators would go and connect to Nixie, even if they have lower traffic. But I think that's probably okay for large players. Again, I'm personally in favor of leaving it onto the market forces. Once it is mandated, it causes more trouble than any good.
For these tenders,
From a telco perspective, I can tell you that we would want redundancies created. So we are fine. There's mandate is a problem because then you are regulating the market smaller and bigger together. It becomes a problem for some. But I'm saying that the easier way is that in any case we would, for a redundancy, create a route and say, okay, let there be a route which takes you out.
just wanted to understand, and anybody in the panel can talk about this, but for these tenders that are in place, which may ask you to sort of peer at Nixie, how effective is that? How much do telcos peer at Nixie then?
Not much, actually. In many cases, we have seen people joining these exchanges, really just Nixie for now, and not having enough capacity or not announcing all their routes, because most of these terms are very high level terms. You are supposed to be connected. Well, define connected. Are you supposed to just take a port, or you are actually supposed to maintain congestion free bandwidth and also announce routes and also accept routes? They don't typically go in those details, and hence it becomes more of a paper formality to be followed.
Talking about, digressing for a minute, talking about pairing and monopolies, we as telcos signed an agreement with the largest dominant player when we entered the market. That was BSNL. He controlled 98% of the entire bottleneck. Will you imagine after 30 years, we are still running under the same agreement? That today he governs my terms of agreement, even though his traffic is hardly anything compared to me. That today he determines that I pay for his traffic coming inside me and my traffic going inside him. That he determines each and every single point of interconnection. That I today cannot even launch a new broadband city without doing an interconnect with him. I am governed by that 30 years down the line. Talk about monopolies.
Is it on voice or on software?
Voice, broadband, anything. I cannot launch a new town without having a POI.
I have seen in the past when the TRI recommended and the government recommended that mandatory peering should be in 4 nodes. So the ISPs, for the namesake, they peer and they will not announce. So only for the paperwork or for the timing, you see some prefixes are there. After that, they change that. So mandatory is not going to work.
Okay, last comment on it, then we have a question.
Basically, with respect to tender documents specifying that they need something, 1, 2, 3, 4, it is basically so way tenders work in India is you try and lobby and try and get other rivals and competitors out of the zone altogether. So that is why tender documents specify. So, for example, recently there were some tenders done by Tamil Nadu government which says that for services for some services in Tamil Nadu, they said that the internet service providers need to have ISP category A license. So this basically removes all category B license holders of Tamil Nadu for services which have to be deployed in Tamil Nadu. I mean, this is basically somebody lobbying and saying that, okay, please put this clause.
I have got this new word in tenders coming. It's called a draft RFPs. We used to hear about RFPs, but a draft RFP gives you full scope to, really navigate yourself and say,
Let's
I want
not
this,
go
I want
there. Sorry, there was
I would like to add
a couple of things.
just to add to the fun that Rahul just mentioned. So I have never in my lifetime seen a draft gazette notification. So we are seeing something.
We've seen.
Now we are seeing.
We're seeing draft
Now we are
notification.
seeing. At least in my previous, I've been in the industry for 3 decades. I've never seen a draft gazette notification. So I couldn't make out whether it's a real gazette notification or it's a draft gazette. We have to read through that entire thing of, whatever pages to be able to find out this is a draft and they're seeking comments.
It said right on top, the one that came out. There are two.
Yeah. So
to,
my question is to Ronak. Ronak, you just mentioned about the market.
could you also please identify yourself?
Yeah, sir. I am Abhinav Jain. So, Ronak, just wanted to check. You spoke about the market being dead. Just wanted to understand. I hope the market is not so dead that you guys are keeping afloat just from the aspect of future growth. I hope you guys are making money as well.
Very, Very difficult question to answer, but we have Nixie here, which is on paper publicly declared non-profit company, and it's me and Dekix sitting here, and we're looking at our balance sheets. You would also probably feel the same. You want to add some comment?
There's the same behind you.
Hi, I'm Sachin. A question for the panel about your experience with courts. Do you feel that to the extent that you've been personally involved or in other capacities, you've come to encounter court rulings and judgments regarding this sector? Have courts in your view over the years played a positive role, or is there something more you would like to see going forward? Thank you.
I just honor whatever court says. I really have nothing to say. But I think the courts have really navigated large part of the journeys. Starting all the way from 1999, the Delhi Science Forum case, eventually the migration package being challenged, the mobility being leveled in terms of limited mobility and main mobility, going on to the 2011 judgment and then the follow-up after that. It's very difficult and I'm giving you the perspective as an investor or as a telco. Certainty is the most important thing for any business. And if suppose I have got a judgment which I have been winning for last 10 years, and in the 15th year I come to know, no, my understanding was incorrect. It creates a lot of challenges for investors. So and there is a specialized court which I think the law has recognized that there is a requirement to adjudicate, and we have a TDSAT now. Unfortunately, the powers of TDSAT got changed post the judgment from the Supreme Court, and you cannot even challenge today a regulation in the TDSAT. So I'm saying, as a business, what everybody wants is certainty of how we are going to do business. As far as judgments are concerned, you just accept, whatever is delivered by court. One cannot say right or wrong on that. But yes, we need certainty to be there for businesses to grow.
So thank you, everyone. I know this has been a great discussion. So many interesting points. I just wanted to invite Setu from ISOC to give a word of thanks.
I'd also ask everyone for a round of applause for Rahul in particular for being the only ISP and telecom operator on stage who's bearing the brunt of the
No brunt. At the moment Kamya sent the mail, I told you I will be the odd one out. But let me be in any case, whatever I have to say. That's all I want to say. But it's always a pleasure, Nikhil, to be in your forums because there's a fair amount of sharing of views, and that's what we really enjoy.
Well, firstly, I'd like to thank our fantastic set of panelists and Rahul as well for joining us and for providing us with all sets of different sorts of views and including some very firm views, which is always good for a discussion. And thank you everyone for staying back and listening to all the discussion and contributing to the discussion. I want to thank again Media Nama for helping organize this. I want to thank BIF and our Delhi chapter for their support, and really great to have these kind of discussions. Thank you again. Have a wonderful rest of the day. We have tea. Please join us.
One other request, thank you guys, and one other request, there's a QR code over there with a feedback form. Please do fill the feedback. If not, then on your way out, you will be stopped and asked to fill the feedback.
Yes.
Which is voluntary but mandatory, I might add.
Yeah, please do it.